Jeffrey Allen from the Ministry of Justice, and Kamali Stevens from who's developed the Growth app and is also part of Change Grow Belong CIC. And they're going to speak about why we need new transformative approaches to build the justice systems of tomorrow today. So I'm going to introduce Jeffrey first. He's the lead service designer at the Ministry of Justice, and he's going to talk about why he uses co-creation, user-centered design and whole system approaches to tackle complex justice issues. And he's going to share with us something about the government's approach to using transformative and systems and design-led approaches. Thank you. Welcome, Jeffrey. Just give him a sec to share his slides. Seamless. Thank you.
There we go. Almost seamless. Couldn't unmute.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Visuals are worth 1,000 words anyway. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's a really exciting event and really exciting to get to speak with all of you today. So thanks to Gemma, Anita, and Nina for bringing us all together. It's a really interesting event. So a little from me, first off, I've spent about 7 years now working within the Ministry of Justice as a service designer. And before that, I worked in international development for about 7 or 8 years and spent about 7 or 8 years as a journalist before that. But just to be 100% clear, caveat, I am speaking in my own capacity. Everything I say today will just be my observations and some conclusions about how government works and how government could work better, but it is not by any means the opinion of the Ministry of Justice. If I can make my slides go, there we go. So I will start, however, with the official position of the government. This is the official position because it was said by Keir Starmer himself a few weeks ago. And this comes from an email that he sent out to all civil servants, but that's been widely reported about. So I don't think I'm giving away any state secrets. But basically, Keir Starmer is talking about how are we going to rewire the British state and calling for a rewiring of the British state. And he says we need to break down silos. We need to harness the incredible potential of technology and innovation. Taking that a step further, Pat McFadden, who is the senior minister within the Cabinet Office and who is responsible for public service reform, said this at an event in December. He said, test it, fix the problems, change the design, test it again, tweak it again, and so on for as long as you provide the service. Suddenly, the most important question isn't how do we get this right the first time, it's how do we make this better by next Friday. The test and learn, that's the test and learn mindset, and he's keen to see where we can deploy it in government. That is super, super exciting to me because that is the kind of thing that I've been thinking about and interested in the whole time I've been working in government. So why is all that important from the inside of government? Well, I think for too long we've been prioritizing the wrong kind of problem solving within government. So people who are familiar with complexity theory and wicked problems will understand this already, but essentially you've got different kinds of problems that people face in society. You've got the simple problem. So a broken window is a simple problem. We all know how to fix a broken window. You get a new pane of glass, you replace the pane of glass, you've got a fixed window. You've got complicated problems. So in this example, building a prison is a complicated problem. There are lots of parts. You need to have the right steels, you need to have the bricks, you need to have the mortar, you need to have the electrics, you need to have the plumbing, you need to have everything put in and installed in the right way at the right time by people who know what they're doing in each of those things. All of that has to be connected up in the right ways. But there's a blueprint for all of that. And you can run that blueprint end to end, and you can make clear yes or no decisions all the way through that process. And by the end of that process, if you manage it fairly well, you will have a prison more or less for a certain cost that does a certain kind of thing, or any building for that matter, a skyscraper, right? But building a prison or a wider justice system that keeps people safe and secure, gives people the support they need to turn their lives around, that's a complex problem. That's what a lot of people call a wicked problem. And the traits of wicked problems or complex problems is that they often have an infinite number of component elements. All of these elements are interrelated. They're continuously changing, often in unpredictable ways. There's usually a human element to that system, and humans by definition are not predictable. Maybe en masse we are, but in an individual basis, humans do not do what we might often think they were about to do. So figuring out how to move from the system we have now to a better and better and better system that achieves the goals we want to do is not something where we just ask ourselves a question and answer that question yes or no as we go along. We're continuously testing new things and adapting and learning and seeing how things go. And also another key component of a complex problem is that it's never fixed. You never get to an end of a complex problem. You go, oh, sorted that one, off we go now. It's a continuous process of evolution. And I would argue that most of the problems that we face in government are complex problems. But the systems that we've developed over the years to address problems in government are more geared towards the complicated sort of problem. So there's some theory behind all this. There's many of you have probably heard of the Cynefin framework, which is where I stole this from. Basically, this is a lot of words to say when you're dealing with a complicated problem, you need to, what they say is sense, analyze, respond. You bring in the experts at each stage and you get it done. It's a very sort of decide what you're going to do, deliver that thing approach. When you're dealing with a complex problem, you need to probe, sense, respond, and do that continuously forever. That's a test and learn mindset that's needed, a test and learn methodology. And that's why I'm so heartened to hear this mandate for testing and learning coming from the kind of most senior levels of government at this point, because that says to me, you know, people like me and my kind of middle levels here working as a civil servant in the system should be empowered to kind of take these new approaches. This, I always like to share this. This goes back to 2014. Tom Loosemore was one of the founders of the Government Digital Services, and he was giving a talk in Code for America. And this is how he described how government functioned back then in 2014. Basically, you write a policy, you guess what requirements are needed, you procure an IT system based on those requirements. He says you inflict that on users and then you operate it. There's no change, right? And this is what he said. And then he went on to say, we can't adapt that process. We can't nibble at the edges. We have to reinvent it. And we have to be open about the fact that we're reinventing it. And I saw a video of this talk shortly after I entered government, and I thought, yes, that's what we need here, actually. And we're in this process. That was 2014. They started GDS back in 2011. I joined government around 2018. Here we are, 2025. I feel like we are moving along that pathway towards reinventing government. And now we have the support, the mandate to keep moving along that path, I think. So that's quite exciting for me. Last couple things. This is kind of, if we want to reinvent that government, if we want to rewire the system, I feel like we need something that looks kind of like this. This is kind of a work in progress of my thinking. We've got the double diamond methodology for design. I'm thinking of maybe 3 loops, right? Your first loop is understanding your system, understanding how all the elements of a system are interrelated, identifying opportunities to make change in that system, prioritizing those opportunities because we can't do everything all at once, right? So we do have to prioritize. But then moving into these loops of prototyping and how do you actually drive change where you see an opportunity? You don't just decide up front and implement it. You do prototyping, testing, learning. As you learn, as you develop more understanding of the system, you then decide to stop some things, decide to change some things, and decide to implement and scale some things. And all of that feeds into a continuous learning organization. And it all looks nice and simple and clean in 3 loops right here, right? But government is a massive, complex beast. And so you can't just tell everyone tomorrow, start doing that, and then it will be done, right? So I've been thinking a lot about, in the belly of this really big, ginormous system that I'm a part of within the civil service and within government, what needs to change to enable this, right? You've got those processes in the middle, but you need people with the skills to really think in this way and work in this way at the core of government. Those people need to be structured in ways that empowers them to share information with each other. They need the right infrastructure to empower them to do that work effectively, but they also need that work to be funded in ways that isn't a constant stop-start process, but allows them to continuously keep moving. It needs to be governed in a way, because we always do need accountability in government, and that is important, but it needs to be done in a way that governs the right things and empowers the teams to take that process. And all of that is underpinned, obviously, by the culture that is set around an organization. The vision is set for that organization and the leaders who drive all of that culture and vision, right? So I feel like there's these kind of 9 core elements to any large institution. And if we want a new way of working within government, we need to be working across all of these at the same time, really. And none of this changes overnight. It's not, it's not something that you just flip a switch, but this is like, turning the Titanic or not the Titanic, turning any large steamship. It takes time. But if we do it well, I think we can move from this plan and execute world into a test, learn, and adapt world. We can move from short-term thinking to long-term thinking. We can move from siloed working to systemic collaboration. We can move from a system that currently stores up a lot of risk to a system that de-risks things early and actually helps us minimize and eliminate risk as we go, and from a system that's reactive to a system that's much more proactive. That's the kinds of things I'm thinking about within the Ministry of Justice, and I'm hoping we're going to be able to make a lot of progress on that over the coming years. I've written a few things about this, so I'm happy to share these slides as well. And there are a few links in here to Tom Loosemore's talk back in 2014, and to the Cynefin framework and these other things I mentioned, and to a couple of the posts that I've written in the past as well.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. We really appreciate you coming, and it's really interesting to hear that the government is this shifting its thinking into this area. I think we felt as though we were kind of riding a wave of something that's kind of coming and is about to have its day. And it's really interesting to hear that you've been working on this for a really long time. And I think we want to make the point too that we're in this for the long haul. There aren't any quick fixes. I think we all know that. So we want to try to support people and build their capacity over the long term. And so, yeah, I think it's really, really important, those points that you make around how you work in complexity. And it's not just those kind of simpler, quick fix ways of working that we need to be focusing on. So appreciate that. Thank you very much. We're going to turn now to introduce Kamali Stevens. As I said, he's the co-founder of the Growth App, and he's a consultant for Change, Grow, Belong CIC. We're really happy to have Kamali here. We've all worked with him in the past. He's an entrepreneur, a storyteller, and a prison reform advocate. And he's going to share his insights about how we need to shift mindsets and power dynamics to transform our justice systems. Welcome, Kamali.
Brilliant. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Cam Stevens. I'm a senior digital consultant. I work for an organization called Grow, Transform, Belong. And I'm also the co-founder of the Growth App, which is a digital reintegration tool that connects service users or people in need who are coming back into the community with the services at a touch of a button, basically. So I guess the first thing that I wanted to say is when I got this question come through, I pondered on it for ages, because there's so much going on within our criminal justice system right now. But I've tried to think about how the best way that I can answer it to get the most meaning in this short space of time. So how do we transform? What do we need to transform approaches to help build the justice system of tomorrow today? I think the first thing that we need to do is quite simple. We need to realize and acknowledge that the current system is not working, and it hasn't been working for a while. It's outdated, it's failing to address the root causes of crime, and it's disconnecting the people who it's meant to serve. I think that recidivism rates currently are really, really, really high. Communities feel isolated, and I think justice is too often punitive rather than restorative. I think we can all look back on last year and see how close our system was to a collapse here in the UK. And I think that now is the real time for transformative change. I think we often talk about the sticky plaster, I guess, approach to trying to plug the gaps. But if we really want to transform our justice system, now is the time that we really need to take transformative change. And when we talk about transformative change, it's not a choice, it's a necessity. Like, if we want a society where justice truly means fairness, rehabilitation, and accountability, we really need to dig deep right now and reimagine what our criminal justice system can look like. There were so many great practices out there, and I find, I guess, from working in the space that we as the UK, we do not take on enough of what's going on, I guess, globally, and look at how we can implement that into our society. I think that every society is different. Yeah, every region of the world, they approach things differently. But if things are working and they are backed by data, then we need to be, I guess, trying new things. Just like Jeffrey was saying, let's try it, let's implement it, let's see if it works. Let's do the research around that. So I guess the basis of what we really need to do is to look at the culture. Transformation, it begins with culture. If we look at the UK right now, the justice system prioritizes punishment over rehabilitation. And I guess the prevailing mindset sees justice-involved individuals as problems to be managed rather than people capable of change. To build tomorrow's justice system, we need a culture where empathy, fairness, human potential are center. And I think this means that we need to train police, judges, prison staff to view justice as a process of restoration, not retribution. If we couldn't imagine a justice system where every decision asks, how can we prevent harm? How can we repair relationships and help people to grow? This kind of cultural shift is what we need as a foundation to really make our justice system more meaningful. As of the last 3 years or so, lived experience has become a buzzword in the justice system. And me, myself, I've got 20 years lived experience of the criminal justice system. And I often say to myself, why did it take me so long to transform? And when I look back on it, honestly, it's because the current system, it isolates people even when they're wanting to take those steps to transform their life. I see so much hope within our justice system, with justice-involved individuals who want to come out, who want to turn their lives around. But the stigma, the challenges, the closed door policies that a lot of people face, I feel it pushes people back into recidivism, not because they want to, but as a survival instinct. So when I think about the current system, I feel that, there are people who know some of the, I guess, places that our justice system needs addressing, and the voices of people with lived experience who have been through it should be front and center in that. Certain policies are made without consulting those who have got lived experience of incarceration, probation, or re-entry. And I know that there has been a big push to incorporate these voices, but I think that we need to do more. And I guess as a final element of how we can really transform our justice system is by putting the community at the heart of it. I think that the communities feel isolated from the criminal justice system, like it's not their problems, and it's everybody's problem. It affects everybody. Victims don't want to see people coming out and hurting other victims. They want to see people who are changed, who can resettle back into society, and not cause any more harm. And I think that this is the area that we really need to focus on, in terms of how we can really transform our justice system today. So I guess my final closing thoughts would be, so if we want to build a justice system fit for purpose, we need to unite as a people. We need to talk more openly, not just in these closed rooms, but engage in the community. We need to be co-creating solutions and having everybody's voices, I guess, central to that. And we need to start practicing what we preach. I know so many people, we just done a lived experience survey, and we're going to be putting out the results of that about people who are working in the justice system who have got lived experience. And as a society, we tell people we need to give people in who have got who have been justice involved opportunity for work, opportunity to rebuild their lives. We need to welcome them into our communities after a period of incarceration. But yet there is so much, I guess, red tape for, I guess, people with lived experience to be working in that same system that is telling everybody to accept these people. That we need to give people second chances. So I think for me, we need to start practicing what we preach as a justice system, and make sure that the voices of people with lived experience are heard. They have so much knowledge that can be imparted onto, I guess, policymakers. And, if we can co-create with people like this, then we really can actually start to make those small notches forward, because culture takes time. It takes about 5 years for a cultural shift. But it needs a whole system approach in that. It's not just about the prisons. It's not just about probation. It's not just about the police or the courts. It's about our whole society, businesses. It's about our faith groups. It's around the everyday person like me and you, people that have never been involved in the criminal justice system, to understand what is going on and to be a part of this social movement. I went and done a talk in Shaftesbury a couple of months ago, and I walked into the room and there was maybe 90 people who were probably retired, had no connection to the justice system, and I went and gave a talk there, and I think they were blown away. And the first thing they all said at the end was, "How can we help?" I think we need to stop being so insular with our information. We need to reach out to our communities a lot more, involve them, because together as a collective, we can really start to make, I guess, the imprint in our society that we want to do, And at the heart of it, I think we're all really passionate about making an impact. That's why we're in this field. It's a really, really tough field. I guess working with the senior leaders that I do, and seeing some of the restrictions and some of the, I guess, things that they have to go through and deal with on a day-to-day struggle. Me being a person of lived experience and now understanding that, I just have a lot more empathy and a deeper respect for the people who are working in our criminal justice system, whether that's prison officers, whether that's governors, whether that's policymakers. It is a really hard landscape to, I guess, figure out. But if we don't start with culture, you can throw a 20 billion pounds at this problem. We're going to be in the same place we are now in 20 years' time. We need to start with culture. So thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope that you got a lot out of what I was saying there.
Huge amount. Thank you so much, Cam. It's making me feel a little bit emotional. So yeah, we really appreciate you taking so much time to think about what you wanted to say. It came through really clearly that you'd done that, and I just wanted to pick out a few of the things that you talked about. You talked about us needing to kind of change the culture and move from isolation and stigma to repair and growth. So that's the shift that you're talking about us needing. And you also talked about it being everybody's problem, and that you talked about how you'd understood people differently by talking to them and engaging with them, and it's about understanding each other. And if you look at our logo on our backgrounds, we've highlighted the word us in there. So it's really about everybody. This is about me, it's about you, it's about all of us here, it's about all the people, the various people that Rachel talked about bringing into a room and trying to talk about these things with. So it's about the collective, and it's about everybody trying to be the change. So thank you. I really think that captured everything that we are here for. So I'm going to hand over to Nina now to lead on anybody who's got questions about Jeffrey's approaches and what Kamali's talked about, and why we need to build new transformative approaches to build the systems, the justice systems of today. Justice systems of tomorrow today. Sorry.
So there's been some really great stuff in the chat. So Sue, just for time, I'm going to pick out a few. So Jeffrey, there was a question that Sue had written in the chat, which was around particularly kind of government systems often being a closed shop and not really wanting to collaborate outside of the systems, particularly with the voluntary sector. And yeah, your thoughts on how we can kind of actually kind of make the most of this new opportunity with government and this test and learn approach, and how do we bring in those different voices, whether the voluntary sector, whether people with direct experience with the criminal justice system, and what experience have you got? I know you've been working on the Prison Leavers Project. You know, how have you been kind of trying to bring all those different voices into the space?
Yeah, so as a service designer who's worked outside of government in charities for many years, and now come into government, it's clear to me that government is just learning about user-centered design and being what we call user-centered or human-centered, right? The government of today was built, the structures and the methodologies of the government today was built 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and has largely hasn't changed that much. But it's trying to change right now. That's what I've found coming into it over the past few years. It is trying to change. And so when I talk to teams inside government about doing research directly with people who have experienced the problem, doing research directly with the front line, understanding from them, bringing that back into their decision making, they are by and large hugely excited by that prospect. It's just not something that government had built into its methodologies for decades and decades and decades. And you know, so I think there is a hunger within government policymakers at the kind of working level. Now, there's working level, there's leadership level, there's all kinds of things going on there, right, within hierarchies and bureaucratic systems and all of that. But at the working level, there's absolutely an interest in gathering more information. And someone I noticed also asked a question about the role of academics and universities. I think it's all of that, right? Like, to understand the system, you need to understand quantitatively what's going on out there across the whole system. You need to understand qualitatively by talking to people, why are these things happening to different people at different parts of the system? You need to visualize all of that in all its complexity and understand what are the underlying mental models, the underlying systemic challenges that we're facing, the underlying cultural mindsets that Cam was talking about and others have been talking about as well, that is causing all of those outcomes that we're seeing at the end of the day. You need to lay all of that out and then understand where are the real opportunities for leverage here, right? That is a very difficult, long-term, complex thing to do, and it's not built into government's ways of working. I'm a bit of a nerd. I'm excited about government being interested in changing its internal processes, because I think it's those internal processes that keep people from actually doing the work that even when they want to do it. So we've got a shift in culture. The bureaucratic processes are following behind that. Some of us on the inside need to help establish what are those shifts in bureaucracy that are needed to enable the people who do want to reach out more, who do want to engage more with the third sector. But I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, government does everything right. We do, loads of things the wrong way around. But I do believe that there is an interest in getting it right. And there's a real recognition from the people I've worked with that the third sector, charities, nonprofits, voluntary sector, has real deep knowledge of what's actually going on. And we need to tap into that much more, as a primary source, not as a secondary or a tertiary source even, but as a primary source of information about the system so that we can all make better decisions together. And I think Cam's point as well, this is a group effort, right? Like this needs to be seen as a group effort. Government has kind of the responsibility to make the core decisions at the end of the day, but can't do that alone and shouldn't be doing that alone. So hopefully, a combination of the culture shifts, the seeds that have been planted, if we can now start tweaking the bureaucracy and opening up the systems a bit more, we can get to a better place.
100%.
Come in on that, Cam.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I love what you were talking about there, Jeffrey, in terms of co-creation. Co-creation fosters not just engaging, buy-in. Yeah, and when you do things to people, it puts their back up. You know, whether that's people who are in prison, people who are in the community. Most of the time, people are having things done to them, not with them. If you bring someone along with you, you get their inputs, you get their understanding. They buy into that and they hold on to it like it's theirs because they've actually helped to design that, right? It's something that we focused on in terms of the growth act that we developed. We went back into prisons and we spoke with 150 men and women. We talked with settlement teams, probation officers, and we talked with charities around what their pain points were, you know, and we built something that is really robust. And I feel that in terms of government, what I find is it's top down instead of bottom up. The information is on the ground, but unfortunately, it's not going up to the top. It's like the top is pushing the information down and saying this is what needs to happen, and it needs to be the other way around. If the government really want to bring people in on board onto any kind of new strategy, it needs to start from the ground up, and that needs to get fed up to the decision makers. You know, you need to put the power where the information is. Yeah, that's what we say in our work. Put the power where the information is. Yeah, because that's where you're going to get the best results. Those are the people that I know what their day-to-day challenges are and how best to resolve them. You know, so I just really loved what you were saying about the co-creation, bringing people along with you, and the fact that the government is getting excited around I guess this new approach that you're trying to push.
Thanks, Cam.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah,
Just in
go for it,
response,
Sue.
because I completely agree with Cam and Alan and what they're saying and that hope. But I think from the terms of the voluntary sector organised sector, I think we are really bored and really frustrated with this top-down approach.
Yeah.
And I think I've had some really bad experiences with the justice system this year in the arrogance from senior officials in the way that they've treated voluntary sector organisations, and that I absolutely support what Cam's saying. It has to change because we've got the knowledge, we've got the front line, we've got the people with the lived experience, but it's not being taken notice of. And that's what I'm really interested in. If you can do something about changing those systems so that they turn around, they transpose, that would be marvellous.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sue.
Buy-in and
Absolutely.
ownership.
Yeah, a lot of our work's going to be around sort of trying to break down these silos, you know, where that's happening. And I think we do have an opportunity at this point to you know, as Jeffrey was saying, to start to make those changes. I'm going to bring in Rachel just very quickly. I know we don't have time for too many more questions, but Rachel, did you want to come in? You had a question about language, I think.
I've missed a lot of this meeting. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure if we discussed language and but basically, I'll bring it back. Basically, I was speaking with a colleague and a friend yesterday around an incident that occurred. So I work for the police. I'm a coroner's officer, but I've previously worked in custody in prisons. So I've got a bit of a background. But also my nephew was a victim of knife violence and he survived. And they were discussing the offenders, the boys who did it, were also victims. So I was saying, well, okay, the language around using them as a victim, yes, they may have gone through something, but equally, I believe that they're traumatized offenders. So we was trying to work out the best way to describe someone who's been through the criminal justice system, has now come out, but then also went on to commit crime. And we just couldn't come out with the best way to describe someone like that without taking away from someone who is a victim. So I'm just looking at what language is there. For me, I would describe the boys who stabbed my nephew as traumatized offenders, as opposed to a victim in that circumstance. But if there's another case that they are a victim, then yes, I understand. But is there any discussion on language? Has there been discussions on that? I just wanted to get a bit of background on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question, Rachel. And I think that really sort of is a really good example of some of the knotty issues that Justice Futures wants to try to unpick. And as Jeffrey was saying, there's often not one correct answer to all this, but these are exactly the sorts of issues that can get in the way sometimes of us making progress, and that we don't take time to try to detangle, to try to sort of look at. And I think these link in very much to the mindsets as well that both Cam and Jeffrey were talking about and that culture change. And language is an absolutely vital part of that, and the stories we tell and the language we use. Jeffrey and Cam, do you want to come back on that? Jeffrey first.
Yeah, just briefly, a little story that made me think of. We did a project a few years ago now, where we were trying to bring user-centered design, human-centered processes, systemic processes into our work. We had several teams looking at across the spectrum of issues impacting people who are leaving prison. And we had people with lived experience of going through the criminal justice system embedded in all of those teams as well. And one of the things we did early on in that was a language workshop where we got together as a team and we shared words, labels that we had heard used in and around the criminal justice system over the years. And then we discussed which of these words are okay to use, which of these words are never okay to use, which of these words are contextual. And it was quite interesting in terms of the specific words. But what I came away with that was the most interesting was that actually labels themselves are the problem, right? Like, why label anybody ever? We do it as a shortcut to communicate, and that's fine. But you'll notice it was technically called the Prison Leavers Project, but I call it a project about people who are leaving prison, because I try to start every description of a person with the word person, or if they're young, a young person, or the boy, or the man, or the whatever, right? Like, start with the person, and then talk about what happened to that person in that context. And that can get a bit cumbersome, but I've trained myself to do it almost all the time. I sometimes slip up and use a label here and there, but I really think we all need to work hard personally just to eliminate the labels as much as we can. And I was a journalist back in the day, so I also, I care a lot about language and how we communicate with our words. And I think we need to and when I say we, I mean within government, we need to do a better job of communicating about things in a way that is not reinforcing stigmas that already exist within society.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jeffrey. I go back to my time, I guess, in the justice system and the impact that the labels had on me: ex-offender, drug addict, bad father. All of these labels, they kind of reinforced my identity. And it took a long time for me to peel that away and say, do you know what? I am more than that. And I think that, I guess, in this current state that we're in right now, if we're talking about upgrading the justice system, the language that we use is really, really important. Just before Christmas, I won an award, and when I got the email through, and it said most innovative ex-offender employment business leader, the Growth App, I wrote back to them and I said to them, really thank you for this, but the words that you're using in this do not align with my values. So if you could change it to 4 million incarcerated, or something along those lines that didn't have that perception. The word ex-offender just says to everyone that this person can't be trusted, So the language is really, really important. In terms of the lady who asked the question, Rachel, in our company, what we're currently doing is hackathons. So we're putting it out to groups of people who have got lived experience or victims, and we're bringing everybody together to discuss these things, right? Because I don't want to say what's right for somebody else. And I think as a collective, lived experience right now, we put out a poll about lived experience, and people are like, I don't want to be called a lived experience because that's putting a label on me, I just want to be a consultant. And I think when it comes to victims or somebody who has been a victim of crime and gone on to do more offenses, I think the first thing that we need to accept is, yes, that they have been a victim in their past and they could be traumatized from that. But in terms of the language to use, in how to, I guess, how we can, again, it comes down to labels. Like, how do you want to label that person? Is somebody who's committed an offense, whether they've been a victim or not, they've still committed an offense. So,
sorry, can I just jump in there? Yeah. Because I think the reason why I was asking is I think being in the criminal justice system myself and see like professionally working,
Yeah.
between the professionals we can identify what a victim, a survivor, all of that. But I think when I speak to members of the public, because I deliver talks on what happened to my nephew, but
Yeah.
members of the public are like, yeah, but they're not victims, they're just prisoners, they're just this. And I'm like, yeah, but they
Yeah.
probably had a past life that's caused them to be a victim and
Yeah.
now an offender. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want to label people, but I need to find a label suitable to deliver it so people can distinguish between victim,
Yeah.
offender, and that it does mix and it interlinks.
Yeah.
So I don't want to label people, but I kind of have
I-
to for
I-
the purpose of what I need to
Yeah.
do.
Thanks, Rachel.
I totally
Just
get
aware of
that.
time, but you know, and I think this is exactly the sort of, like I said, the sort of the knotty issues that, you know, and actually the, you know, Justice Futures working in collaboration with, you know, other organisations and hopefully lots of people on this call we can take forward to, you know, kind of really be understanding. And I think the public aspect is absolutely part of what we want to do at Justice Futures as well, around, you know, engaging with the public and with, you know, different citizen processes. Like Gemma said, she's done a lot of work around deep democracy. So how can we use those sort of transformative approaches to work with the public as well, on this agenda, not just in our sort of silos, you know, within our sector, but sort of working out with the public as well. Thank you so much, Jeffrey and Cam. And sorry we didn't have time for all the questions, but I'm going to pass back to Gemma now.